What's the story, everyone? Welcome back to Gaelic Fan TV. How's the form? How are we all getting on? So we did the football power rankings, and in today's video we're going to be doing the hurling power rankings. So the hurling championship has finished it. It's done. It's finished. We know obviously Clare have won the All-Ireland. We know Limerick's dominance has been beaten. But who are the best 20 teams in hurling right now? We're going to be ranking 20 down to 1. We won't be doing like a full power rankings of every single inter-county hurling team in the country, and the main reason being, to be honest with you, is that I think below the Christie Ring we don't really get to see much of the lower tiers, and I think it would be unfair of me to judge the likes of Sligo, Mayo, Donegal, because I haven't watched them, to be honest with you. I haven't seen them. I've seen bits of highlights obviously here and there, but you haven't really got to see too much of the lower tiers, and I think that's probably discussion for another day, in all honesty, because I think something does need to be done about that. But we're going to be ranking 20 down to 1. And speaking of the team in 20th, it is London. So we're going to start things off looking at the 20th team and making our way down. So we do have London in 20th. They finished 3rd in the Christie Ring. They finished just behind Derry and Kildare. So I don't think there can be any dispute in this, in my opinion. Very good season, London, in fairness. When you think about it, in the football power rankings, I had them 32nd, and that's obviously out of 33 teams. But London are better than a lot of teams in hurling on the island of Ireland, you know what I mean? Better than Sligo, probably, better than Mayo, better than Donegal. And Jack Goulding had an outstanding season for London. He scored 5 goals and 50 points, and he was actually the top scorer in the Christie Ring Cup as well. So outstanding season for London. In 19th, I've gone for Derry. They lost out in the Christie Ring Cup final. They lost to Kildare in what was a fairly comfortable win for Kildare, in fairness. Cormac O'Doherty had a very good season for Derry overall. And look, Derry are making progress, and they might be one of the teams, especially when you look at some of the turmoil that's going on within Meath hurling this year. I think Derry might fancy their chances in the Christie Ring next year. And in 18th, it is Meath. They had a very bad season. They lost every game in the Joe McDonagh. And to make things even worse, their manager, Saoirse Bulfin, he left halfway through the season as well. So not a good season by any stretch of the imagination from a Meath perspective. Getting relegated. Look, they did win the Christie Ring the last time they were in it 2 years ago, so that will give them confidence. But overall, definitely a disappointing season from a Meath perspective. And in 17th, it is Kildare. They won the Christie Ring, their second Christie Ring in 3 years. And to be fair to Kildare, they had an outstanding season. Look, in all honesty, with Kildare, we're looking at them and thinking, can they make the step up now over the next couple of years? Can they push on in the Joe McDonagh? Because I think at hurling, we all want to see new teams come along. We all want to see new teams make the breakthrough, make the step up. And when you look at Kildare, they have some very, very good players. Jack Sheridan was outstanding throughout the Christie Ring, 4 goals and 39 points. David Qualter and James Burke were both very, very good as well. So I think for Kildare, that is the big question now. Can they make the step up? But overall, out of the teams within this region, in the Christie Ring or in the bottom half of the Joe McDonagh, I think Kildare are certainly the side that have the most potential. So yeah, we've got them in 17th. In 16th, we've got Down, and Down have probably been one of them teams that have stayed in and around this level over the last couple of years. I feel like they're not necessarily good enough to get promoted, but not bad enough to get relegated. And I think next season it will be interesting, especially with Kildare coming up. Could Down maybe be the team that could end up going down? It's going to be interesting to see. They have a few good players in there, like Pearso McCrickard and Dottie Sands, 2 very good hurlers, in fairness. And in fairness to Down, a side that probably have such limited resources in hurling in comparison to the rest of the country. Fair play to Down, or in comparison to the teams down south, or even in the teams in the west or in the east. Fair play to Down. They've done a very, very good job out of what they've had in recent years, and they're in 16th. In 15th, it's Westmeath. I think overall Westmeath will be disappointed by their season, in all honesty. They were poor enough in the league, but then also you look at their performance obviously in the Joe McDonagh as well. They were one of them teams, having been relegated last season from the Leinster Championship, beating Wexford obviously in the process. You were thinking they should come straight back up, and this should be a Joe McDonagh Cup for Westmeath. But in all honesty, they were never really near a Joe McDonagh. I mean, they lost on the opening day to Kerry, which was a big surprise, and then they went out and lost to Offaly by 6 points. And from then on in, their season was pretty much over. So a disappointing season from Westmeath. They drew it down as well, so there was even a concern and a worry at one point that Westmeath could potentially even get relegated. So yeah, we've got Westmeath in at 15th. Definite improvement is needed. They still have Killian Doyle knocking about. they'll definitely be thereabouts, I think, in the Joe McDonagh next year, but a disappointing season from their own point of view this year. And as I said, Kerry in 14th, and specifically because they beat Westmeath on that opening day. Maurice O'Connor, outstanding season from him, 134 across 4 matches in the Joe McDonagh Cup. And yeah, for Kerry, like, you're often looking at Kerry, and I think it's been one of them things where, because they got to a couple of Joe McDonagh Cup finals in a row and lost them, we've almost been thinking, will Kerry now drop away? Like, all the other teams seem like they're improving. You've got Kildare coming up. You've got other teams like Offaly and whatnot who are building. And there's always been this worry that Kerry at some point will go down and they'll be the team to get relegated from the Joe McDonagh. But in fairness, they keep on finding a way to prove people wrong, and they keep on pulling off good results against teams when, you know, they're not expected to beat. So fair play to Kerry. We'll put them in 14th. We've got Laois in 13th. They lost the Joe McDonagh Cup final to Offaly, but overall, like, a better season than the one before anyway. Like, it was only, what, 3 years ago when they were in the Leinster Championship, and, you know, I remember them obviously beating Dublin, what was it, in 2019, in that famous preliminary round game. So, like, good players in there, Patrick Purcell, Aaron Dunphy. They would have been disappointed, obviously, with that Joe McDonagh Cup final loss. Like, the chances they missed towards the end of the game were incredible. So, like, for Laois, it is a bitter pill to swallow, but at the same time, definite favourites for next year, no doubt. In 12th, we have our first Liam McCarthy side, and that is Carlow. And look, some people will say, like, I do have Offaly in 11, so some people should say maybe Carlow should be above Offaly, given the fact that Carlow drew with Kilkenny in the Leinster Championship, and what a win that was. And they did have a couple of good performances, but I do think overall, like, Carlow did get relegated, and, like, Marty Kavanagh, obviously very good season, Chris Nolan, very, very good as well. But I think Offaly were just that bit better overall in terms of the season. And the fact that they won the Joe McDonagh, taking Carlow's place in the process, I think you have to put Offaly just a little bit above them, in my opinion. Speaking of Offaly, like, some very good performers this year. Owen Cahill, and of course the boy wonder Adam Screeney. Going to be very interesting to see how he's going to do in the Leinster Championship next year. You've obviously got Dan Burke as well, Brian Duignan, Killian Sampson. Like, a lot of very good players within that Offaly side, and they are progressing, and especially given the under-20 All-Ireland success and everything that went with it, Offaly are building. Like, they're a good bit off being competitive, I think, with the top teams, but they certainly are building at the moment. In a 10th, it's Antrim, and, like, in a similar fashion to their neighbours, like, I think Antrim, like, their neighbours down, I think Antrim are, like, I think they're good enough to stay in the Leinster Championship, but, like, they pull off the odd result here and there. Like, obviously their win versus Wexford was incredible, their first ever championship win versus Wexford. What a story that obviously was. They were very competitive with Galway, disappointing against Dublin. Like, few very good performances here and there for Antrim, even considering the players that they lost. And Darren Gleeson's done a very, very good job at getting a tune out of Antrim. Next year is going to be the big one, though, because, like, Offaly are coming up, Offaly are building. Could Antrim get relegated from Leinster next year? Like, at this moment in time, I would think they probably will, but at the same time, they are that type of team that often pull off big results against the teams above them when you're not expecting it. So fair play to Antrim, though. Like, overall, solid season to stay up in Leinster and even be, like, they were definitely closer to getting out of Leinster and in terms of getting to, like, a preliminary round game and getting that third place than the last couple of years. And fair play to them. You have to give them massive credit for that, considering Neil McManus obviously retired at the end of last year as well. So yeah, huge credit has to go to Antrim. In 9th, it's Tipperary. Very disappointing season from Tipperary from their own standards. You look at their season in Munster, they lost 3 games. They drew the other one with Waterford as well. And, like, for Liam Cahill in particular, it's very hard to know with Tipperary. Like, can they turn around next year? Do they need a change in management? I'd be curious to know what Tipperary fans think in the comments down below. It feels like they're older players or more veterans, like experienced players, didn't really turn up this year. The likes of Jason Ford, obviously the likes of Jake Morris at times, I don't think had their best year. Gerard O'Connor was very good, but he was very good in the league, then quiet enough in the championship. And Shawnee Keneally was obviously a big player coming off the bench as well. Owen Connolly as well. It's just hard to know with Tipperary. They have younger players there, but they're still reliant on, you know, your Bonner Mars and your John McGrath to come off the bench and save the day. And I just think for Tipperary moving forward, they need to come away from that. Otherwise, they're not going to progress. So, like, very disappointing season from their perspective. Have them in 9th. I think you could mention Galway in a similar light in at 8th. Henry Shefflin's obviously left Galway. Massive rumours, and potentially by the time this video has come out, Micheál O'Donoghue could be back as Galway manager, which will be quite the story, considering like there was a lot of talk that he fell out with the county board, and he obviously was Dublin manager. He's left Dublin now, so that's going to be interesting to see who Dublin get, and we'll get onto that. But Galway, very disappointing season. Like, they were just so flat, and like it was very hard to know what their game plan was at times. Like, and aside from Conor Whelan, there wasn't really anyone there, and like there's no even players or forwards that are coming into my head that I can think of off the top of my head and be like, he was very good. And that just goes to show how bad of a season Galway actually had. And like, some would argue Tipperary, like Munster, very, very competitive. So like, some would argue Tipperary should actually be ahead of Galway on that fact. But yeah, very disappointing season from Galway. In a 7th, we have Dublin. Like, it's interesting, we got absolutely battered by Kilkenny in the Leinster final, but getting to a Leinster final was still an achievement, and getting there was still signs of progress, in my opinion. And I think overall for Dublin, like, we were very good against Cork as well, and like, to think, you know, the amount of chances we missed in that game. Imagine we could have won that game and got to an All-Ireland semi-final. And look, I don't think we would have beaten Limerick that day, but it would have been like extraordinary to have seen us in an All-Ireland semi-final. Like, there was progress from Dublin, and the fact that Micheál O'Donoghue's now left, like, is a little bit disappointing, I think, overall. Chris Crummy had a very good season. Dara Power, I thought, was very good at different moments as well, as was Brian Hayes. From a Dublin perspective, very impressive season. Just that absolute hammering against Kilkenny put a dampener on the season, because I think overall, I think it was fairly impressive actually from a Dublin point of view. I have Wexford above Dublin in 6th, and some people might be surprised by that, because Wexford lost to Antrim in the Leinster Championship. They drew with Dublin. They finished behind Dublin in the Leinster series. But I think, like, the fact that Dublin were absolutely battered by Kilkenny, I don't think Wexford would have had a similar result. And I think Wexford went out with their heads held high more so than Dublin. I know Clare beat Wexford fairly comfortably in the quarterfinals, but like, I think overall Wexford just probably had a slightly better season than Dublin, in my opinion. And I think Wexford have more to be positive about going into next year, given the younger players that they have. And obviously Lee Chin, like, an outstanding season from his perspective. He was absolutely brilliant. Then we move into the top 5, and in a 5th we have Waterford. It's interesting with Waterford because they didn't get out of the Munster Championship. They finished 4th in the Munster Championship, but the 3 teams that finished above them are the top 3 in the country, in my opinion. Like, spoiler alert, like, they are the top 3 in the country. Like, so for Waterford, like, and when you look at it, they narrowly lost to Clare, narrowly lost to Limerick, beat Cork, who obviously went on to reach the All-Ireland final. The big one for Waterford that they will have massive regrets about is the draw with Tipperary. Everyone else beat Tipperary and Waterford didn't, and ultimately that's what cost them in terms of their place in getting out of the Munster Championship. But at the same time, I think they can look back at the year like with a lot of positivity. Like, Stephen Bennett was very good. He scored 2-3 versus Tipperary. Desi Hutchinson looked more like himself. Caleb Lyons was very good at different parts as well. It is interesting that Davy Fitz has left Waterford. Peter Quealy's obviously come in as manager. Dan Shanahan's going to be a second-hand man as well. So going to be interesting to see what happens now with Waterford moving forward. But overall, like, I think they can look back at their year with a bit of positivity. And of course, they do have Austin Gleeson coming back into the fall next season. So, like, Waterford can be positive about the future, I think. In 4th, I've gone for Kilkenny. They haven't improved, but they haven't gotten worse. It's, you know, it's a bit like when we're speaking about Antrim maybe as well. Like, I think Kilkenny have shown signs of improvement, but at the same time, it's like, you know, maybe Clare and Cork have now gone above them in the pecking order, whereas I think in the last couple of years, maybe Kilkenny were probably number 2 on the basis they got to the last 2 All-Ireland finals. It's interesting with Kilkenny. We know the brilliance of TJ Reid. He had an up and down season. He wasn't at his best. Adrian Mullen was obviously out for most of the year, but their best player was John Donnelly. He was absolutely brilliant from a Kilkenny perspective. But I think they'll have massive regrets over that All-Ireland semi-final, Defeat versus Clare. The way that they lost that game, having been so far in front, and the fact that Clare went on to win the All-Ireland as well, I think would have hurt them even more. So, like, I think it's interesting looking at it from a Kilkenny point of view. Will they have retirements? Will players leave? It's going to be interesting to see going into next season. But no doubt about it, Kilkenny, they're certainly not the team they were obviously 10 years ago. We know that. But they look maybe as far off in terms of winning All-Ireland as they have for a couple of years, and I think that's the worrying thing from a Kilkenny perspective. And then we move into our top three, and in at number 3 we have Limerick. Now, I still do think Limerick are the best team in the country, but I think off the basis of this year's championship, you can't have them above Cork. But it is interesting because Clare won the All-Ireland, but Limerick beat Clare twice this year. So it's a little bit unusual, isn't it? Like when you look at like head-to-head meetings, like Limerick have had Clare's number this year but didn't win the All-Ireland, and Clare did. Cork beat Limerick twice but couldn't beat Clare. So it's interesting, isn't it? But overall, I think I do have Limerick in third. Like, they won the Munster Championship, they won the 6th in a row, like, which is extraordinary in itself, and you know, they just came up short against Cork. And like, overall, I think like Limerick will look back and they'll obviously have missed Barry Nash hugely. I think he was a big loss. But going into next year, like, again, it's like, this isn't Limerick done. I've seen some people say, you know, the Limerick dominance era is over. They're gone. They're finished. Limerick could come back and win the next 3 in a row. Like, their age profile is still very good. The younger lads coming through as well, like Shane O'Brien, he looks very, very good as well, in my opinion. You've got Aidan O'Connor, Adam English, who both look like very good players as well. So I think there is positivity still with Limerick. Like, they're not going to lose Shamie Flanagan, Aaron Gallan, Garrod Hegarty. Like, those players are not going to go anywhere anytime soon. So I think Limerick are still going to be there or thereabouts. And yes, they lost to Cork, but they're still there, guys. They're not going away. And then we have the top 2, and it probably isn't a surprise that I have Clare in first and Cork in second. We'll speak of Cork first of all, though, because Cork, like, they were the ones that beat Limerick. They were the ones that beat the champions. And not only did they do it once, but they did it twice. And I think for Cork to not have won the All-Ireland, I think will be very, very painful. And I think Cork fans probably waking up this morning probably still feel a bit of pain because of it. But overall, like, it's like they'll still look back at the season with a huge amount of positivity, though, because like, at one stage in the season, like, they lost to Waterford, then they obviously went out and lost, you know, a couple of weeks, or, you know, a week or so later to Clare, and you were thinking Cork, you know, Cork are gone here. You know, Pat Ryan is gone, and these young players haven't kicked on in the way that we would have hoped. But as we saw, like, they went on to have an extraordinary year. Like, Brian Hayes, outstanding. Alan Connolly at different stages, brilliant. Shamie Harnedy, very good as well. And that goal, of course, for Owen Downey as well. Like, absolutely brilliant stuff, putting that ball into the back of the net. Kieran Joyce, very good season as well. So I think Cork, like, the thing is with Cork is that, yes, like Patrick Horgan, there's big question marks over him. Will he give it another year? I think he should, because Cork, like, if they can just continue the way that they're playing, I think they'll have to get over the line at some point. They're too good not to win an All-Ireland, in my opinion. So, like, it mightn't be next year, it might be the year after, but as long as their core group of players stick around, they don't get many injuries, and they continue the same attitude that they had this season, I think an All-Ireland is in this team. I've no doubts about it. And then in first, we have Clare. And as I said before, it's a little bit of an unusual one because Clare lost to Limerick twice. But I think the fact that Clare won the All-Ireland, like, you have to give it to them. And look, who knows? Like, if Limerick had beaten Cork, who's to say Clare wouldn't have beaten Limerick and then finally got that monkey off their back in terms of a knockout game or a big game, you know, a final, like, that they would have finally won against Limerick. Who's to say they wouldn't have done it? But overall, you have to give it to Clare. They won the All-Ireland, and the way they done it as well, like the story around it, losing the Munster final, Tony Kelly's performance obviously in the final was like absolutely breathtaking, out of this world really. Like the goal was like beyond belief how he managed to do that, and some of the points as well, like flicking it over players, hitting it off his shoulder on the half turn, outrageous. And like, yeah, what a year, what a season for Brian Lohan as manager as well, to get them over the line. And like Shane O'Donnell, outrageous performance from him. Mark Rogers, very, very good as well. Dermot Ryan, I think, very much an unsung hero in the Clare side. And I think for Clare, like, they've broken the duck, they've gotten over the line. It's kind of like nearly similar to the Armagh footballers to a certain extent. Can they now go on and win a provincial title? You know, it's mad to think like Clare have won 2 All-Irelands since the turn of the century, but they haven't won a Munster title. It's kind of rare where like you'd nearly want to win a provincial title more than an All-Ireland, but I think that will be the case for Clare next year, which is very unusual. Don't get me wrong, if the same thing happened again and they won an All-Ireland, they would take it, but it's unusual at best, and you don't often see it happen, to be honest with you, through inter-county level. And and everything else. Yeah, absolutely outstanding season for Clare. On the basis of this year, you have to have them at number 1. And the thing is, I mentioned before that, look, Limerick could come back and win the All-Ireland. But the thing is now is that I think, like, for the last couple of years, Limerick were the favourites and everyone was back in Limerick. The fact now that someone's beaten them and toppled them, I think, like, that will even give Clare confidence. And I think going into next year, between Clare, Cork, Limerick, Waterford, I think it's wide open. I think any one of them 4 could win it. And even Kilkenny might even fancy their chances and mightn't be a million miles off. So, yeah, I'm going to go Clare in first. So we'll run through my power rankings in total then before we finish up. So on 20th, it's London. 19th is Derry. 18th is Meath. 17th is Kildare. 16th is Down. 15th is Westmeath. 14th is Kerry. 13th is Laois. 12th is Carlow. 11th is Offaly. 10th is Antrim. 9th is Tipperary. 8th is Galway. 7th is Dublin. 6th is Wexford. 5th is Waterford. 4th is Kilkenny. 3rd is Limerick. 2nd is Cork, and 1st is Clare. They are my 2024 end of season hurling power rankings. Let me know yours in the comments down below. I'm sure there will be disagreements, as there always is in these videos. Stay tuned for more content, more videos coming soon. Until then, hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll speak to you all later.